hallway smelled like chalk dust and disinfectant, the kind of smell that clings to every school in America. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell stood perfectly still outside classroom 3A, her worn duffel bag slung over one shoulder, her uniform clean but faded from years of hard use. Beside her, Ghost, her canine partner, a German shepherd with eyes like molten gold and a body built for war, pressed his shoulder against her leg. He was calm, as always, disciplined. But Sarah felt the shift in his posture the moment she did. She heard laughter. Not the kind that comes from joy, not the bright, unguarded sound of children being children. This was different, sharp, cruel, the kind of laughter that cuts. Sarah's hand tightened on the strap of her bag, her jaw set. Ghost's ears swiveled forward and his breathing changed, just slightly, but she knew him well enough to read it. He was listening, assessing, waiting. She took one step closer to the doorway and leaned just enough to see inside, and what she saw stopped her heart. At the front of the classroom stood her daughter, Lily Mitchell, 9 years old, brown hair pulled back in a ponytail, shoulders trembling, crutches shaking in her small hands as she struggled to balance on her prosthetic leg, the one she'd worn since the car accident 2 years ago that had taken her father and half of her childhood in a single horrible moment. Lily's face was red, her lips pressed so hard they'd gone white. She was trying not to cry, trying so hard to be brave. And in front of her stood the teacher, Mrs. Holloway, middle-aged, arms crossed, a ruler tapping impatiently against her palm. Her voice was loud enough to carry into the hall. "Can you move any slower, Lily? We've been waiting 5 minutes for you to get to the board. 5 minutes. Do you think the rest of the class should suffer because you can't keep up?" Some of the children looked away. A few stared at their desks, uncomfortable, silent. But others laughed. One boy in the back row whispered something to his friend, and they both snickered. A girl near the window covered her mouth, but her shoulders shook with barely suppressed giggles. Lily's crutch slipped just an inch on the tile floor, and she caught herself, her knuckles white around the grips. More laughter. Mrs. Holloway sighed heavily, as if Lily's existence was an inconvenience she'd been forced to endure. "Stand up straight. You're making a spectacle of yourself." Sarah felt something crack open inside her chest. She had faced enemy fire in places most Americans would never hear about. She had dragged wounded teammates through mud and blood and bullets. She had made decisions in seconds that determined whether people lived or died. She had been shot at, bombed, hunted. But nothing had ever hurt like this. Ghost shifted beside her. His body went still in that particular way that meant he was locked on. His eyes never left Lily. He didn't growl, he didn't bark, but Sarah felt the tension coil through him like a spring wound too tight. He knew. Dogs like Ghost were trained to detect threats, to sense danger, to protect. And right now, in that classroom, he sensed something wrong. German shepherds had been beside soldiers in every American war since World War I. They pulled wounded men from trenches. They detected explosives that saved entire platoons. They stood watch in the darkest hours when human eyes couldn't see and human ears couldn't hear. Ghost had done all of that and more. He had pulled a bleeding SEAL out of a firefight in Ramadi when bullets tore through the air like rain. He had found IEDs buried in dirt roads that would have killed dozens. He had stayed awake for 36 hours straight on a mountain ridge in Afghanistan, his ears tuned to every sound, his body a shield between Sarah and the darkness. He had never failed a mission. And now, his mission was Lily. Sarah forced herself to breathe. She was a SEAL. She didn't react on emotion. She observed, she calculated, she moved with precision. But she was also a mother, and there was a point where observation became complicity. Mrs. Holloway tapped the ruler against the chalkboard. "Lily, if you can't participate like everyone else, maybe you should wait in the hallway until we're done. You're distracting the other students." Lily's voice came out small and broken. "I'm trying. Trying isn't good enough." That was it. Sarah stepped forward and pushed the door open. The soft click of the latch echoed like a gunshot. Every head in the room turned. The laughter died mid-breath. Mrs. Holloway's face went pale. Sarah walked into the room with the kind of presence that didn't need to be announced. She moved like she always did, quiet, controlled, absolutely certain. Ghost moved with her, his paws silent on the tile, his body in perfect heel position. He didn't need a leash. He never did. The children stared. Some of them had probably never seen a real military working dog before. Ghost was magnificent, 85 pounds of muscle and intelligence, his black and tan coat sleek, his ears tall and alert. He looked exactly like what he was, a warrior trained to save lives. But he didn't look at the children. He looked at Lily. Sarah crossed the room and knelt beside her daughter, ignoring the ache in her knee, the one that still carried shrapnel from Kandahar. She reached up and gently wiped the tears from Lily's cheeks with her thumb. "You're strong. You're brave. You did nothing wrong." Lily's lip trembled. "Mom!" Before she could finish, Ghost moved. He lowered himself slowly, deliberately, until he was lying on the floor beside Lily's prosthetic leg. His body pressed gently against her, warm and solid. His head rested near her knee, and his eyes, those calm golden eyes, stayed locked on her face. He didn't make a sound. He just stayed. Lily's breathing slowed. Her fingers unclenched from the crutch grips. She looked down at Ghost, and something in her face softened. The fear didn't disappear, but it wasn't alone anymore. Ghost had done this before, in hospitals, in rehabilitation centers, with wounded veterans who woke up screaming from nightmares. He knew how to be still, how to offer comfort without words, how to remind broken people that they weren't alone. Sarah stood and turned to face Mrs. Holloway. The teacher was already stammering. I didn't realize." "What exactly did you say to my daughter?" Sarah's voice was quiet, too quiet, the kind of quiet that made people nervous. Mrs. Holloway swallowed. "I was just trying to keep the class moving." "What did you say to her?" The room was silent. Every child was frozen, eyes wide. Mrs. Holloway's mouth opened and closed. "I told her she was slowing down the class." "You told her she was a distraction. You told her trying wasn't good enough. You allowed children to laugh at her pain." Sarah's voice never rose. It didn't need to. "You humiliated a child who lost her father and her leg in the same night. A child who gets up every morning and fights harder than most adults ever will just to walk into this building." Mrs. Holloway took a step back. Sarah didn't move closer. She didn't need to. "I've led men and women into combat," Sarah said. "I've trusted them with my life, and they've trusted me with theirs. And the one thing I learned, the one thing that matters more than tactics or training or firepower, is that real leadership protects the people who can't protect themselves. Authority without compassion isn't leadership, it's cruelty." Ghost's tail twitched once, but he didn't move from Lily's side. Sarah turned to the classroom. 23 children stared back at her, some ashamed, some confused, some still processing what they were seeing. "Laughing at someone's pain is easy," Sarah said. "It costs you nothing. But standing up for someone when they're hurting, that takes courage, real courage, the kind that matters." A boy in the third row, the one who had whispered and laughed, looked down at his desk. His face was red. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. A girl near the front nodded. "Me too." Another voice, then another. Lily's shoulders relaxed just a little. Ghost's ears flicked toward the door, and Sarah turned. The principal stood in the doorway, her face tight with concern. Behind her was the vice principal and a school counselor. "Mrs. Holloway," the principal said, her voice clipped. "We need to talk, now." The Mrs. Holloway's face went white. She opened her mouth to protest, but the principal raised a hand. "Now." The teacher walked out of the room, her footsteps quick and uneven. The door closed behind her. The principal looked at Sarah, then at Lily, then at Ghost, still lying calmly beside the little girl, his presence steady and unshakable. "I'm so sorry. This should never have happened." Sarah nodded once. She didn't need apologies, she needed action. And from the look on the principal's face, action was already in motion. The counselor stepped forward and knelt beside Lily. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Lily nodded, her hand resting on Ghost's head. The dog's tail wagged once, slow and gentle. "Good," the counselor said softly. "You're very brave." Sarah crouched down again and looked her daughter in the eyes. "You ready to go home?" Lily nodded. Ghost stood, his movements smooth and controlled. He waited beside Lily as she adjusted her crutches, and when she started walking, he matched her pace exactly. Not ahead, not behind, just there. They walked out of the classroom together. The hallway was quiet now. Sunlight streamed through the windows, warm and golden. Outside, the world felt bigger, safer. Lily stopped near the front doors and looked up at her mother. "Mom?" "Yes, sweetheart?" "Ghost knew I was scared, didn't he?" Sarah smiled. "He always knows." Lily reached down and ran her fingers through Ghost's fur. The dog leaned into her touch, his eyes half closed in contentment. "Thank you, Ghost," Lily whispered. Ghost's tail wagged just once. They walked outside together, into the sunlight. Sarah's hand rested on Lily's shoulder. Ghost walked beside them, calm and proud, his head high. Sarah had fought in deserts and mountains. She had seen the worst of humanity and the best. She had been decorated for valor, for actions under fire, for decisions made in impossible moments. But this was different. This wasn't about medals or missions. This was about showing up, about standing firm when it mattered most, about teaching her daughter that cruelty didn't get the final word, that compassion was stronger than mockery, and that love, real love, meant protecting the people who needed it most. Ghost had taught her that, in a way. He had shown her, mission after mission, that loyalty wasn't just about obedience, it was about presence, about being there when the world got dark, about offering comfort without needing to be asked. That afternoon, Sarah sat with Lily on the porch steps of their small house. Ghost lay between them, his head resting on his paws, his eyes half open and watchful.
"Mom?" Lily said. "Yeah? Do you think the kids will be nicer now?" Sarah thought about that. "Some of them will. Some of them learned something today. And the ones who didn't, well, that's on them, not you." Lily nodded slowly. "I was really scared." "I know. But then Ghost came, and you came, and I wasn't scared anymore." Sarah's throat tightened. She put her arm around her daughter and pulled her close. "You're never alone, Lily. Not ever." Ghost's tail thumped against the wooden step. Lily smiled, small but real. That night, after Lily was asleep, Sarah sat on the back porch with Ghost beside her. The stars were out, scattered across the sky like silver dust. The air was cool and quiet. She ran her hand along Ghost's back, feeling the strength in his muscles, the steadiness in his breathing. "You're a good boy," she said quietly. "The best." Ghost's ears flicked toward her, but he didn't move. He just stayed there, solid and calm, the way he always did. Sarah thought about all the missions they'd been on together, all the lives they'd saved, all the impossible moments they'd survived. But today had been the most important mission of all, because today they hadn't just fought an enemy. They had protected something sacred. They had stood up for a little girl who couldn't stand up for herself. And in doing so, they had reminded a classroom full of children and one broken teacher that cruelty only wins when good people stay silent. Sarah looked up at the stars and thought about her husband, about the man who had loved Lily with everything he had, the man who had died protecting his family on a rainy highway 2 years ago. She wished he could see Lily now, see how strong she was, how brave. But in a way, maybe he did, because Ghost was here, and Ghost had been his dog first, before the accident, before the Navy had brought Sarah and Ghost together as partners. Ghost had loved Lily since the day she was born, and he always would. Sarah smiled, tears sliding silently down her cheeks.
"We did good today, Ghost," she whispered. Ghost's tail wagged once in the darkness, and that was all the answer she needed. Some battles aren't fought with guns. Some enemies don't wear uniforms. Some victories don't come with medals. But they matter just as much. Because courage isn't just about facing danger. It's about standing up when it's easier to stay silent. It's about protecting the innocent, even when no one's watching. It's about teaching the next generation that kindness is strength, that compassion is power, and that every single person, no matter how small, no matter how broken, deserves dignity. Ghost knew that. Sarah knew that. And now, so did Lily. The next morning, Lily walked into school with her head high. Sarah and Ghost walked her to the door, just like they would every day from now on. The principal met them in the lobby. "Mrs. Holloway has been placed on administrative leave pending a full investigation," she said, "and we've implemented new training for all staff on supporting students with disabilities." Sarah nodded. "Good." The principal looked at Ghost, then at Lily. "Would you like Ghost to visit the classroom sometime? I think the kids would love to learn about military working dogs." Lily's face lit up. "Really? Really?" Ghost's tail wagged. Sarah smiled. "We'd be honored. Because that's what heroes do. They show up. They stand firm, and they teach the world that love, loyalty, and courage will always be stronger than cruelty." Ghost had proven that on battlefields across the world, and now he'd proven it in a classroom in small-town America. Not all heroes wear uniforms. Some walk on 4 legs. Some have golden eyes and hearts bigger than the sky. And some, like Ghost, remind us that the greatest mission we'll ever have is protecting the people we love. If this story touched your heart, family, drop a comment and let us know where you're watching from. We love hearing from patriots across this great nation and beyond. And remember, courage isn't just found on the battlefield. It's found in the everyday moments when we choose to stand up for what's right, when we choose kindness over cruelty, and when we choose to be the voice for those who need one. That's the legacy of every service member, every working dog, and every person who refuses to let injustice win. Stay strong, stay brave, and never forget,